Hey, and welcome back to another episode of the Leading Adam podcast. Today, Adam and I are joined by Aleicha Ostler, who is the executive director and founder of the Invent Learning Hub. We're super excited to talk with her about design thinking and incorporating that in the K-8 charter school. So stay with us. Thanks for joining.
The Leading Adam podcast is hosted by me, Adam Binkerd. I've spent the last 10 years researching how a healthy human experience is the key to innovation in student retention and education, and now I'm taking to the mic to share what I've learned. Hear how I've defied the odds and transformed from a landscaper to a national expert in student success in less than 10 years. Not an educator? That's okay. Stay tuned for entertaining stories and practical takeaways about leading self, leading leaders, and leading culture. The Leading Adam podcast is co-hosted by Erika Crabtree, produced by Chris Spangle, and sponsored by 240 Solutions. Connect with us at 240solutions.com, and I hope you'll stay tuned because together we can change the world.
All right. Well, hey, Adam.
Erika, I'm really enjoying season 2.
Yeah, this is fun. Guests are fun. Not that I don't enjoy just the two of us, talking and.
Thank you for saying that.
Don't, no offense taken, please.
No, not at all. It just it enriches the conversation. And you know me, I love learning about people. I'm really enjoying season 2.
Yeah.
This is good.
Well, cool. Well, today I'm stoked because we have a guest, someone that I met a long time ago. As someone, who has been a leader in the education space for really her entire career. So without further ado, we've got Aleicha Ostler joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And you are the founder and executive director of Invent Learning Hub.
Yes, we're a K-8 charter school on the southeast side of Indianapolis.
Awesome.
Wow.
And I was trying to remember, and I was telling Adam earlier, so you and I met back in, 1999-ish?
7, 8, I thought. 97, 98.
Nice try, Erika.
Okay. Post high school.
Yes, post high school, teaching color guard.
Yeah.
Those were some great memories.
That's where the teaching started.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, amazing. Well, I'm excited to dive in. And one of the reasons why I was so excited to talk with you and have you join us on this podcast was because you have, really focused on the, human experience and leading with that and incorporating that into the design of your school and using design thinking, like all the things that we've talked about so much. And I'm anxious to just learn a little bit, tell us a little bit about who you are and kind of how you grew into what you do now.
Yeah. So I started my career in Indianapolis public schools, started as a 5th and 6th grade teacher, taught for about 7 years, became an assistant principal in IPS. I think I did that for 1.5 years, 2 years. Then moved into being a principal. I was a principal for 8 years. Kind of got to a point in my career where I felt like it was time for a next step. That next step ended up being moving into a fellowship with the Mind Trust. That was a 2-year fellowship.
And what is the Mind Trust?
The Mind Trust is a nonprofit here in Indianapolis. They gather a lot of philanthropy funds to really promote building out new innovative school programs, new innovative nonprofits that support schools. They really just do a lot in the space, and now they've moved out to even supporting nationwide with different educational initiatives.
Wow.
So
and I've not heard of that. Sorry to interrupt you. I've not heard of that. But that's Indianapolis.
Yes.
Yeah. So for those of you listening that don't live in Indianapolis, she's talking about the Mind Trust is here, based in Indianapolis.
Yes. And actually, Indianapolis is viewed as one of the more innovative spaces for education, a lot because of the Mind Trust. It's one of the only cities where one of the charter authorizers is the mayor's office. That's unique to Indianapolis.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
Interesting.
Moved into that fellowship. During the fellowship, you get to travel a lot. You go to other countries and see schools. You see schools within the U.S. And it's really tailored to whatever it is that you are trying to do with your school. So yeah, I spent 2 years in the fellowship, then opened the new school. We've been open now for 6 years.
Wow.
So,
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible.
K to 8.
It's a K through 8 school. And our focus, our innovative focus, is more along the lines of post-secondary pathways and design thinking. So design thinking is a class that our students take. And then pathways is something that we focus on starting in 3rd grade, really helping kids think about what do they want to do post-secondary.
Yeah.
So.
Why is, you said design thinking is one of the classes that your students take, but it's K-8. Why that course, and when in their journey do they take that?
They start it in 1st grade.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
We actually attempted kindergarten. They weren't quite ready for it, but we started in first grade. And the reason is, when I was in traditional public school, the focus had become so much on state testing and prepping for a test.
Yeah.
I felt like we were losing that problem-solving piece,
Right.
helping kids think outside of the box, really a lot of the things that are driving careers today.
Yeah.
So I felt that that was missing and it needed to be brought back in. Another thing that I had noticed really in this community, the graduation rate from high school is pretty low. It's about 50% in this community. I myself am a first-generation high school graduate in my family and college graduate.
Congratulations.
Yeah. So I saw this trend with our students where there was kind of that lack of helping them start at an early age thinking about, what do I want to do after high school?
Okay.
And also involving families in that. Because if the family has not graduated high school and college, they don't have a lot to provide their children in providing that direction.
You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, and what you don't realize, it can often feel like you're moving outside of the family to graduate and move on. So that engagement with the family, I think, is really important, so that there's value add for the whole family.
Yeah, so you mentioned that you incorporate families into that process, and I would imagine there would be some challenges with that. And what kind of have you seen with with the families and just being able to talk about those types of things with the kids and working with them in that way?
What I see is a lot of emotion, really. Like our 8th graders always prepare a presentation for their families prior to going into high school that outlines everything that they're thinking about doing post-secondary. We ask that they identify 3 careers of choice, and they're basing their school choice on what they're thinking about post-secondary. And many times when we sit down in meetings with families, this may be the first time they've heard their child say, I want to be a lawyer, or I want to do this, or this is what. And so it brings out a lot of emotion. And honestly, I think it's a great time for those families to also get on that track with that student and start thinking about, oh, okay, this is what my child wants to do, and kind of get behind that.
Yeah.
And that's a piece that we try to add into those plans is how can the family then support that child in meeting those goals?
Yeah.
So the design thinking process that they're learning from grade 1 is designed to teach them the skills, right? To really build that step into pathways. Is that accurate? Am I understanding what you're saying right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, design thinking is empathy first. So you're thinking about the group of people or the person that's impacted by something. So I think in that instance, yes, we're really asking families to dig deep and really look at, what does your child want? What are they thinking? And getting our families to see choosing a high school is not always just based on what's a good high school, where did your family go to high school, what's the history. In Indianapolis especially, high schools are geared toward a lot of different things. You can go to a high school that's a medical magnet.
Yeah.
You can go to another high school that's doing technology stuff. They really are more specialized. So, and even if they go to a traditional public high school, usually when they enter freshman year, they're going to place them on some form of a track,
right,
based on what they're thinking about. What type of diploma are they going to receive? So here in Indy especially, we need to have kids and families thinking about, why am I going to this high school? How is it connecting to what I'm going to do post-secondary?
I really love that you're taking a student from a very early age and you're beginning to build the really the mental capacity for critical thinking and things like that, so that they can be an active participant in that plan. I know you don't know me. We've just met today. But I remember very much my first meeting with a guidance counselor in high school. I was not an active participant in that conversation in any way at all, and that's no knock to her.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't prepared for that, and I also wasn't really into school, so there's that part of it. But what you're doing, Aleicha, what you're describing is preparing a student to actively participate, not just in that conversation, but in the design of their future. And that is an incredible concept that you've brought to reality. So I have to ask, what provoked you to say first generation high school, first generation college, the audacity it takes to say, I'm going to start a school? I mean, first of all, that's incredible. But what provoked you to say, I have to do this?
I mean, I think it was my background, my history, and watching my students. Honestly, I have seen over the years where some of the families in our community, 8th grade, and we very specifically do not call our 8th grade a graduation. We call it a promotion ceremony.
Okay.
Because we were even seeing that 8th grade promotion was being seen as more of a graduation.
Oh,
For a lot of families. Or maybe I won't get to that high school graduation. It was seen as kind of the really big deal.
Wow.
So we really try to flip that. And even in the narrative at our 8th grade promotion, it's all about what's coming next, because even with design thinking, with this way of pathways, it's a mindset shift. It's trying to get our families to think further beyond maybe what their family has done, and it was like that for me too. Right. And so I think it is different when maybe you experience coming from a family where, there wasn't a history of graduating from high school and college. Yeah. And to be honest, it can cause you, when you move further with education and your family did not, it can cause some separation in that family. So,
Yes, it can.
So it's that piece. I think I really understood that.
Yeah.
And to know, how can we get families on board with this? How can we educate the family to let them know these are the options? It doesn't mean they've got to move far away from home. It doesn't, it can be value add, like I said, for the entire family.
Yeah.
Instead of one family member just doing something different.
Yeah. And what I love about what you've described and what you described with your prior, with your experience in high school as well, is that I think for so long, generations, high school and learning, elementary, high school it's a very passive experience. You just sort of show up and you sit in the class, and all of the classes and everything is sort of dictated to you. So the idea that there is a choice in high school and how to make those choices based on really understanding what it is that, as the child, what they want to do and making that plan, is just mind-blowing, that to think that there is that choice that's out there, and to think through that. And I'm sure for a lot of those families, the concept that there is even a choice is something that's very new and foreign
definitely.
to them.
Yeah, I'm not even sure in our city that families even fully understand always the difference between charter Indianapolis public schools.
I'm sure they don't.
Sometimes we have families who they attend our school and they still think we're a part of Indianapolis public schools when we're not. So I honestly don't even really think charter versus traditional public matters so much to our community, as much as they just want to find a good school for their child.
Sure.
And that's the nice thing about this city, is you can do that.
Yeah.
You can look for, if you have 2 children that are very different in your family, they can go to 2 different schools, and that's okay. You know?
Yeah, I think it is a really cool experience. I think what makes it so powerful, as I'm hearing you talk, is I've spent a lot of time studying the way we learn and what that looks like. I love design thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I love those processes. But the reason I bring that up is because you talked a little bit before we turned the camera on, just about the fact that your school sits in a neighborhood that is partly gentrified
Mm-hmm.
and then mostly not. And that alone, I'm curious to get your thoughts around the idea that of having a choice, having ownership in my education, I think fits this demographic better than
Mm-hmm.
most because they are maturing cognitively, um, not emotionally, but cognitively faster than other demographics because of the experiences they have at home,
Mm-hmm.
because of the background of their families. And so at 14, you've got the cognitive development when it comes to critical thinking and survival of someone who's more like 17 years
Mm-hmm.
old, which does introduce the opportunity for more andragogical learning style. And I think that's what I love most about what you're doing is you're saying, I see you as an adult and you're empowering them with choice.
Mm-hmm.
Um, do you see that happening? Is that a part of your conscious awareness as you're leading the school and engaging your staff and team?
So, kind of what stuck out to me in that question was where you talked about cognitive versus emotional being at different levels. Um, so that's the piece I'm going to pull out. I
Yeah,
mean, tell
go
me if
for
I'm
it.
not answering the question, but um, we focus a lot too on social and emotional learning. That's a big piece of what we do. It is very brain based. We actually spend the beginning of the year teaching staff and students about the brain, about what the amygdala is. What does it mean to be in your amygdala? What do the different parts of your brain do? And every classroom then has an amygdala reset station. And so at the beginning of the year, it's just kind of a sensory station that students can choose to go to. It's never treated as a consequence. It's a choice. It's there as a tool. We start the year with caution tape across it. We call it mini neuroscientist unit. And then they do a ribbon cutting ceremony and it's opened for use for the rest of the year.
Wow.
So that is, and what you're saying, I definitely do see. Our
Sure.
kids really come in knowing so much more than we can imagine, especially when it comes to like technology and survival. But then that emotional piece is, we also deal with a lot of children who've experienced a lot of trauma.
Yeah.
And when you've experienced a lot of trauma, going into that amygdala quickly, not being able to regulate. So we work a lot on self-regulation, co-regulation, and using those amygdala reset stations.
Yeah.
So that was the piece that stuck out to your question, and I'm not sure I really answered it, but
No, you absolutely did. And I'm going to pause here. If you're listening, the amygdala is the emotion center of the brain. And so if you're wondering, if you're sitting here, how do I engage this and follow this conversation? That's what she's talking about is these centers to where you can more or less decentralize heightened emotion, right? Whatever that case may be. So as we continue, I just want to make sure we define that without making it a long discussion. But that is an incredible process, and I'm sure you're seeing powerful results just from a student that needs a moment.
Yeah.
In the center.
Yeah, we do a lot of, we teach tapping, EFT tapping. Our kids do it every single morning.
Really?
Yeah.
And what is that?
It's just different pressure points on your body. It was actually, there's a great video out that it was used after Sandy Hook in that school because obviously they were dealing with a lot of heightened emotions. And it's just a technique used to calm yourself. And it's just different points on your body that you can tap. So we teach that. We teach breathing methods. There's lots of different strategies we teach kids to get out of an emotional state. Our teachers model it. If a teacher is frustrated, we say, go over and get something off of the ARS station and show the kids, like,
Yes.
I am regulating myself right now. And that modeling. So yeah, we've seen kids, especially during like state testing, which can be really stressful, stopping and tapping or breathing. So we see them using those tools.
Awesome.
That's amazing. Yeah, what I love about that is the teachers are modeling it, the teacher or the kids are brought into that process of that and see that that's okay to take advantage of those tools. Like, I think I need some of those in my own house.
Right.
It's just something they'll carry with them for the rest of their life. Yeah, and kind of just going back a couple questions. One is, you mentioned like you do design thinking even with first graders. Like, what does that look like for a first grader versus an eighth grader? Like, what does that look like even?
Yeah. So in first grade, it's going to be a lot more guided. In eighth grade, it's going to be a lot more of them making choices around the problems that they're solving. In first grade, it's probably we're all solving the same problem together. But our model is we will take something community-based that's linked to either their social studies or science standards that we're teaching. We will do a lot of background building with students around that issue. We will do the empathy building, which is, okay, let's get into whoever this is affecting. Let's learn more about it. So probably a lot of videos, a lot of books, a lot of reading. And then we move more into ideating to solve that problem. So then students are developing ideas around how they would solve the problem, and then we build something to show that work. We always do also family exhibitions where families can come in and then see the projects that they put together. So I know our lower grades just did some work around flight where they were designing different types of airplanes. So based on issues that, they came up with. Now, our eighth graders, we'll see things like they'll work with Easter seals, for example, on assistive technology, different devices that are out there to help people who may have various disabilities. And then they're given a scenario of a child with a disability, and then they design something for that, an assistive device. And then what we do is we print them out on our 3D printer. So that was a really cool,
cool. And another way they're gaining empathy from that and learning.
Yeah. And the empathy piece for me, that was something I had just consistently heard staff saying students were struggling with, empathizing with others. And if you think about students coming in with a lot of trauma, maybe challenging home situations, they are thinking more of survival. What do I need?
Right.
And that empathy piece is not always there. So we are hoping that through the problem-solving process, we are building in that empathy piece. We're teaching a lot about community-based issues so that our students are from first grade on developing that empathy lens.
I can't help but sit here and think how transferable all of this is to the workplace.
Yes.
Right. I mean, it's rooted so much. You're using design thinking as your model, but it's rooted so much in problem-based learning theory as well. And that's so practical for the workforce. I mean, you're teaching someone to see solutions, not obstacles. And that's going to be really valuable. What do you, if at all, you said 6 years, the school, at this point, what pathways are you seeing that are maybe more popular than others? Are you seeing students use this and choose kind of not a predictable path, but one industry over another?
I don't think we're seeing that connection yet. I will say, we've definitely had to shift a little bit. When you open a school and everything's new,
Been there.
It goes a lot slower in the beginning than you expect. You want it all to function a certain way. So our design thinking program, it is each year moving a baby step further. We want it to get to the point where it's more building wide mindset. Right now, I would say we're still in the phase where it's here's our ELA program, here's our math program, here's our design thinking program, here's our pathways program. I'm not sure that the link is there yet. So that's definitely a next step, but in 6 years. And just to throw out there, our very first year was the COVID shutdown. So Design thinking moved from being a class that year to not existing while we were virtual
Sure.
to when we came back to school functioning on a cart for a while.
Hmm.
So definitely some obstacles there with like building a program.
Yeah.
Sure.
I would say really if we're talking about how many years the program's been built, we're looking more 3 years
That makes
because
sense.
of the COVID piece that happened.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, maybe then what I was going to ask, and you set me up perfectly, is because it's not fully integrated, right? It's still kind of an isolated class. What direction or practical advice would you give to the instructors, the teachers out there listening and going, I work in a school that I love, even. I can't change the school, but what principles can they take and integrate right into their classroom, whether it's math, English, or history?
Yeah. I think embracing failure is probably one of the biggest mindset pieces. Not the idea of, and actually there was a quote that our principal shared on Friday, and it was all around the idea of, it's not, this is right, this is wrong. It's like, let's look at this and take an opportunity to learn from it. So a culture of learning and a culture of teaching, which are we, so moving more toward that culture of learning, embracing failure, okay, let's look at why this is wrong or what we need to do differently or a different way we can solve.
Yeah.
Also, even in math, are we teaching from just algorithms? Is this just, this is the right way?
Right.
Why? It just is?
Yeah.
Or are we moving more into number sense teaching, which is understanding how numbers function together, understanding processes, and solving.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really that mindset shift.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That differentiation between, you said, learning versus teaching is, that stands out to me. And it seems like that learning incorporates that sense of, understanding how to fail and, being able to problem solve, and rather teaching, again, I guess, would you just find out as maybe more passive and more of the feeding information?
Yes.
There's a right and there's a wrong. It's more of a fixed mindset.
Yeah, exactly. And how involved is the student in the learning?
Mm-hmm.
Is this one of those classes where I lecture, you take in, and we don't have a lot of discussion? Or are we doing more Socratic seminar and, letting kids discuss and, learn and be an active part of their learning?
Yeah.
I think that's probably the piece too, an active part of their learning.
You have no idea how much, Aleicha, I'm holding back. I just want to dive in and start boring everyone with, you said Socratic, and I'm like, yeah.
I figured that was like
more.
little, well,
I'm so into all of that. But there's something here that, Leading Adam is a podcast about leading humanity. And what does that look like? And how do we lead understanding that people are humans before they're anything else?
Mm-hmm.
And your school, your learning facility is built really on this principle. And something you just said about integrating it into the classroom, I want to revisit and draw that also to the way that we as instructors or educators interact with our teams, our peers, even our leaders. And you said that to embrace failure.
Mm-hmm.
I've been a student of leadership for quite some time. And since starting the podcast, really trying to say, how do we cook stuff down to really practical information? And one of the things I've recognized is, and I hear you saying it in so many ways, is we too quickly assign a thing as good or bad. And we do that when we make a mistake or a misstep, is we give it good or bad when inherently it's just a thing. And the process of design thinking is to recognize, empathize, of course, but recognize a variance and then correct the variance. It can be a non-emotional process. And I'm thinking when we're interacting with our peers, our leaders, so many times we assign an action or a decision on their part or ours as good or bad, instead of just assigning it as a thing, right? Which positions us to then engage a conversation differently. And I really appreciate you bringing that to the, like, how do you, for the teacher wondering, how do I do this? Well, start there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just suspend all good and bad and just live in what it is
Mm-hmm.
and work through that cognitive process. But that I wanted to make sure we pause just to translate that over to the way that we interact with our peers and our leaders, because we do that a lot. We assign values to things that sometimes just are, and it allows conflict resolution or that to become really emotional when what it really should be is collaborative, and we fail in that. So I would wonder, the data person in me is going, you should start observing, are your students better at conflict management and resolution? Because I bet they are, because you're teaching them these skills to suspend calling a thing something that is unnecessary. Right. So just wanted to pause and say thank you for that. But I just cannot imagine how difficult it was to start in a COVID year. And so you have 6 years open, you say about 3 years, probably, if you're looking at the program, but I would say in your soul, you've got 20 years of experience just in this. COVID had to be 10 of that. How did you navigate?
Yeah.
That with your
COVID
team?
was extremely challenging. Oh gosh. We did a lot of reaching out to other colleagues that we had that lived in the virtual space. That was first move.
Smart.
And we had to look at the experience that our students and families were, and I think what people missed was, we work in the inner city. Many of our families may be living in smaller spaces.
Mm-hmm.
There may be multiple kids sharing bedrooms, living with another family. A lot of our families, they just didn't have the luxuries of some suburban families of how, they may not have had internet. They may not have had devices. And it was just so much more challenging for our students. So there were a lot of different things we started doing as far as even when we brought them back into the school and some kids were still virtual, they were actually observing a class happening instead of videos. I don't know. There were just a lot of little things. We had to give a lot of grace too.
Sure.
Like, let's provide this in different forms. Like, here's what we can do for a family. Maybe mom was gone all day and the student had no help at home versus someone who had someone sitting right there with them. We just had to provide a lot of options.
Yeah.
There was also a lot of phone calls happening. We had a whole team that was just calling and checking in with families. Because it just wasn't like, and I think that was what was totally missed. For some kids, they didn't have what they needed at home to do virtual learning.
Mm-hmm.
It was maybe not a space that was, we had situations where, because, maybe kids were sharing bedrooms and such, there's one kid across the room doing a class with another teacher. You can hear that in the background, So it was just, it was very challenging. So what I will say is we got through it.
Yeah. It wasn't as clean as what middle-class America wanted it to be, right? It just wasn't that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and we were one of the first schools in the city too that when we were able to bring kids back in person, we did.
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of regulations around, like with middle school, they had their desks were supposed to be 6 feet apart. So we actually ended up moving our middle school down to the cafeteria so that they could be in person, because we knew that was what was best for our students.
Yeah.
A lot of schools have held on to virtual for snow days and such. We have not, because we just know that is not what's best for our students.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And I have a big question that I don't know how to answer this or how you might answer this, but I mean, the things that you've talked about here are just, I love it. I'm just mind blowing, really. And just in terms of the way that you've been able to weave, what your students need and take account of that particular population, the things we talked about with design thinking, really preparing them with critical thinking skills and emotional coping skills that they're going to use the rest of their life. You started a charter school after 17 years of, working in the public school system and having that experience. Like, why can't we do this in the public school system? Like, like what has to happen? Or, why does it have to be a charter school? Why can't this just be happening everywhere? This should be
I
normal.
I would say it can happen in a traditional public school. But what you find in a lot of traditional public schools, and I can really only speak to here in our city because that's where I worked, but
Right.
it when you have a large school system, there can tend to be a lot of top-down processes. It's kind of the bureaucracy piece, things are being put out as to what's best for the district, but it's not always considering what specifically that school needs. It may be based off of the medium, like what do most of our schools need? But then you find it comes to your school and maybe that's not what your school needs.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of my reasoning. I think there are great schools that are public traditional schools and there are great public charter schools.
Mm-hmm.
I think the difference is that in a charter school, there's a lot of local autonomy.
Mm.
You can make decisions, parents can be a voice, and as a community, you can decide what you want to be happening in that school. And I think that's the big difference. I will also say that when you're in a charter school, it's very easy if you're in a large school system to say, well, the district made us do that, or to kind of place blame elsewhere. When you're in a charter school, it's all on you. You can't really say, well, somebody made us do this. No, this is what we've chosen to do based on what we think our kids need.
Mm-hmm.
So you really have to own it.
You got to own it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you think part of the solution then to the education challenges that we face in America is the decentralization of education?
Oh, gosh, that is a big question.
Well, Erika put it out. I can't let her.
The door. I knew we were. I think it probably wouldn't work to do that because I don't know that every leader would have the capacity. I don't know that we have enough leaders with that capacity. And I don't know that enough leaders want that level of responsibility.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in a negative way at all.
That's all right.
I just think that, there are also a lot of challenges that come with being in a charter school and having it all on you. It's a lot more responsibility.
Yeah.
And a lot of responsibilities that maybe you're not trained to be responsible for, like facilities. There's been a lot I've had to navigate with facilities. And thankfully I have enough people around me that, I can consult with others and make decisions. But there is a lot more that comes to running a charter school because it is all on you.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I appreciate your answer, and I'll put a bow on our conversation and then let you take it. What I hear you saying is, and I agree with you, so I'm going to say it so that you don't have to. We have a leadership issue in America, and that's partly why this podcast matters to me. The issues with education are not the government's responsibility. They are the community's responsibility. And because of that, we are responsible for solving the leadership gap. And that gap is not one of position or getting things done. It is one that is rooted in understanding there are differences from this human and that human across the road. And those differences matter, and they matter most in learning. And that learning matters most in the developmental stages of life. And I really appreciate you dancing that question politically correct. You have to lead here in the city in education. I do not. And so I will say it very quite frankly, we have a leadership problem. And if we can solve that, we can solve quite a bit. Because genuine leadership does look to the left, look to the right, and say, how do I live in a way that allows all of us to win together? So thank you. I'll say my thank you. I'll give it back to Erika. Thank you for what you're doing and just who you are. Incredible. I'm so inspired today.
Yay. I don't think I can say any better than that, but yeah. Oh, thank you so much. And I know we're so close on time, and I feel like we could sit here just all day and just wrap on this. Um, but talk to us about. We talked a lot about the kids and the students so far. You have teachers and staff that you onboard and bring on and bring into this system. How do you manage that? How do you handle that? And
So actually, while I was designing the school, I went to IUPUI to get a design thinking certification. And one of the big project that I did was essentially a hiring process. So we were thinking through what are the types of questions we're going to ask to really make sure that we're getting people that can really be a part of our philosophy. How are we also selling them on what we do, through the process? How are we treating them through the process, all the way down to just offering a bottle of water when they come in, or, we gave a part of our process is that we do a personality inventory. So we're trying to learn about you and what your needs are. Beyond that, we also do staff circle every week. So it is exactly that. It's a community circle where we sit down, we kind of do a share out about how everybody's feeling. We do celebrations, appreciations. We also do what's called badge work, which the badge work is just getting to know employees better. There's actually one that we do on privilege. So talking about the different privileges that individual has, and then they share out about that and what they learned from that activity. It is a very good pulse check on where we are with culture, which really guides leadership on, okay, our team is really stressed right now. What can we do to help with that?
Right.
It is a balancing act in education because being a teacher is extremely hard. It is not an 8 to 4 job.
right.
And there's just so much they take home.
Mm-hmm.
Also, when you work in the city and you're dealing with students with so much trauma, there's a lot of secondary trauma, because you're carrying the weight of that every day.
Yeah.
So that's a big piece. And I will say, when I moved from a large district, the culture was a little bit more around evaluation first. And evaluation never feels good. At our school, we've tried to move away from evaluation's not the focus. The focus is on coaching and improvement and support.
Right.
And usually when we survey our staff, that's what they say. Feel very supported. I feel like there's a lot of coaching going on, a lot of help. And that's the feel that we're trying to create. It's not a perfect system. It's still a stressful job. It's still just a stressful field to work in.
Right.
But we really do try to pay attention to where are our people. You got to help keep the balance.
Right.
We discourage people coming in on the weekend to work. Don't come into the school on the weekend.
Boundaries, yeah.
And teachers do. They're very dedicated individuals.
Yeah.
They want to come in and do things on the weekend. But we discourage those things because we know, everybody needs that balance.
Yeah. And we've talked a little bit about, with the higher education background and everything, like you can't get away from the numbers and the quantitative side of it. But yeah, in the teaching world, that a lot of times looks like those evaluations and things like that. But really, what I'm hearing you say, like the focus of it, no one is motivated and gets out of bed because of the numbers.
Right.
Those don't feel good, whether they're good or bad. No one gets that excited about numbers, but it's the feeling of being supported and being cared for and knowing that the leaders and you care for each other. It's really about the community that's being created and knowing that you feel like you belong in that space and there are people there who care about you and all of that. So
yeah, and it's not a
wonderful.
culture of that you can't mess up.
Right.
Once again, you're a first year teacher, you're a second year teacher, you're gonna mess up, you're gonna make mistakes, but you're gonna keep getting better at it.
Right.
And I mean, really, in the education space, I mean, nobody ever is there. It's that nobody ever steps back and goes, "I've got it, I've figured it all out." I mean, several years into my career now, you're always trying to be better. I have coaches. We have a team that we work with through an outside organization. I have a coach, that's working with me on being a better executive director. Our principal has a coach. So it's kind of that mindset of like everyone's being coached. Everyone's trying to be better.
Right.
Constant learning. Well, I know we're at time.
We are at time.
Past it. But I mean, this has been, just a thank you again. I mean, the work that you do is so important, and this has been a wonderful. I've learned so much just getting to sit here and talk with you. And one of the things that we focus on here that we, talked early on when doing this podcast is we like to have, something very practical, very, how can we boil this down and have something very practical to go out and apply today. And I think you've talked about so many great things here today, but if you had like just one piece of advice or just, two educators out there right now who might be like, gosh, how can I take some of this back into, my school? Like what advice or what takeaway would you have for them?
I think one of the biggest things is seek feedback. I know, first of all, when I seek feedback from our teachers before we're going to move with something, there are always things that they point out that we didn't think about.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I also think it just makes them feel valued, that they're being treated as experts, and they have a voice in it. So that would be my advice: is seek feedback from your team when you're a leader.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Love it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Aleicha, for joining us. This is amazing. Thank you so much.
No problem.
All right. With that, I think
Cheers.
that's a wrap. Cheers.
Thanks for joining us here at the Leading Adam podcast. We hope you found inspiration and hope to see you again next time. Leave us a comment on YouTube, or if you have an idea for a future episode, let us know that too. You can connect with us at 240solutions.com. Thanks, and we hope to see you again next time.